Ladies and gentlemen, how you all doing? I hope you're having a fantastic day. So we're here today with the Cold War by Oversimplified Part 2. Now you lot smashed the like goal that I said. Maybe I should set these more. Because usually these videos, they do get a fair amount of likes, but like you got like smashed right through it right away. So that was pretty awesome. So we're here today with the Cold War Oversimplified Part 2. Last time we ended up with obviously the conflicts between Russia and Germany. So I just want to kind of see how this continues. It's a 17-minute long video. It's quite long, but I mean, better. My opinion is always like it's better if it's longer than shorter. Give us as much information. Obviously, it's oversimplified, but give us as much information as you can in a relatively short time frame. I also just opened my window and a fly flew in. Now, I don't actually know whether the fly flew back out or not because I had to close the window because I want to record and I don't want to wake up the neighbors. So hopefully it's out. Hopefully. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, part.
This video was made possible by Skillshare, an online learning community where you can learn just about.
Does that make a difference? Yes, it does.
Signing up using the link below and get your first 2 months for free. For anyone who thinks recent U.S. history has never been as crazy as it is right now, allow me to present to you the 1960s, extreme cultural division, major political assassinations, and the closest the world has ever come to nuclear apocalypse.
There was this, I forgot his name. This one person, I'm sure they're gonna mention it because he was pivotal in, stopping, not stopping, but not really so much as stopping, but more so in not starting the war. The one Russian guy who was like, there might be a mistake here. Let's not rush. Let's just wait a few. The Americans wouldn't be that stupid to launch the first. Like he got all these signals and he was like, let's just wait a second. I forgot what his name. I think he was in a submarine or something. And because of him, like if it was a mistake on the system, and if he made a mistake, we would have been done for, basically, like straight up. But yeah, I really have to mention him because he was such a pivotal figure that even I know about him. Even I.
Choice of methods for putting down socialism in Latin America, a certain Fidel Castro met with a certain Che Guevara.
Viva la Revolution.
And the two of them decided they should grow some awesome beards and overthrow the Cuban government, which is exactly what they did. Cuba had been America's summer playground, and America didn't like seeing a communist regime being set up in its own backyard. So the U.S. immediately began training up Cuban exiles to invade Cuba and overthrow Castro. However, as the day of the operation came closer, Kennedy wanted to conceal any U.S. involvement in the plan. So he massively scaled back American air support, and as a result, the Bay of Pigs invasion was a humiliating defeat for America. But Castro felt there was still an impending U.S. threat to his regime. Meanwhile, in the Soviet Union, Khrushchev had a lot of medium-range nuclear missiles that couldn't reach America, but they could if they were positioned, say, on an exotic Caribbean island off the coast of Florida. Hey, I'm a communist who hates America. You're a communist who hates America. You know what that means? We should fall in love. I was just going to suggest you set your missiles up in Cuba. Oh, no, you're right. That's a better idea.
ICM.
Be still, my beating heart. On October 14th,
in this case, just medium.
A U-2 spy plane over Cuba noticed something strange. Sir, you need to look at this photograph. You're right. That's the cutest dog I've ever seen.
Nah, not that.
I was referring to the Soviet missiles. America freaked out as they realized what was going on. They were completely vulnerable, and they had to act fast. They knew that airstrikes or an invasion of Cuba would likely mean nuclear war with the Soviet Union. So Kennedy came up with another idea. A blockade. The U.S. Navy announced it would stop and search any Soviet ships heading to Cuba, and would sink any that did not comply. In response, the Soviet put its military into full combat readiness. The U.S. did the same, and began drawing up plans for an attack on Cuba. Things were escalating.
Not yet,
fast,
wrong way.
Both superpowers were getting ready for World War III. Emergency communication.
Let's play a fun little game.
Things were escalating fast.
Spot the country, or identify the country right here. Can you see my mouse? Yes, you can. All right. Obviously, the boot of Italy. That's Italy. That's obviously Germany. Obviously, Great Britain, the UK. That looks like Sweden, I want to say. Let's just... Right, let's figure it out. The Benelux country. That should be a good way to help me identify it. So, Germany, to the right of Germany. What fits? Now we're playing, pick the puzzle parts, the puzzle pieces apart. I can't see France. That could be France. France is not that small, is it? No. Compared to... No, definitely not. France would have to be like this right here. But France is more like... Vertical. I always, when it comes to like vertical and horizontal, I'm always like, which one? But then I always think like horizon, the horizon. You're watching the sunset. That's horizontal, and vertical is up and down. Ooh, that looks like Poland. I want to say. Obviously, I don't know which countries are on. I can identify the big ones like Germany, Italy. This is this is the UK, obviously, and just topographically, that is how to phrase it. Topographically, the topography of a country. Yeah, topographically would probably be the right way to phrase it. I would say that that's Belgium. That would be France. I want to say that this is Sweden. That much territory. Yeah? That's definitely a... No, I think that's definitely Sweden. I think that's definitely Sweden because the invasion. That would... Yeah. That I think that's definitely Sweden. That's France. That's Italy. That's Belgium. Germany. The UK. I would assume that... that's Poland here. Right here, the tiny one, the tiny blue one. Netherlands would probably be... Where are Netherlands in Germany? From Germany? To the south? To the south would be Austria. Hey. Maybe you lot can get better than me. Let me know if I'm wrong, if I'm right. Let me know how many you got right on your first try without looking it up. That'd be a fun, interesting game.
And both superpowers were getting ready for World War III. Emergency communications between the two sides broke down as Khrushchev rejected Kennedy's demands for the and for the first time in history, U.S. Strategic Air Command moved to DEFCON 2. DEFCON 1 means nuclear war. The Soviets shot down a U-2 spy plane over Cuba. A Soviet nuclear submarine in the Caribbean mistakenly believed war had already broken out.
That's the one.
Two of the senior officers gave the go-ahead to fire.
That's the one what I was talking about.
Thankfully, the third senior officer, this beautiful man, refused to authorize the
Yeah.
decision.
Yeah.
Finalized its preparations, and I kid you not, the day before the U.S. were set to decide the day and time for the Cuban invasion, Khrushchev was like, hey, you know if you just removed your missiles from Turkey, we'd remove ours from Cuba?
Oh,
Yeah.
perfect.
Good to
Well,
me. It was a
perfect.
bit more complicated than that, but at the last second, the two sides finally came to an agreement.
Turkey,
Soviet missiles were
that's
shipped
what-
out
okay.
of Cuba, and the world breathed one gigantic sigh of relief, except for one guy, who was bloody livid. Phew! Let's hope that's the biggest
Castro
crisis
will
of my
always be livid.
presidency. Unfortunately
Oh my.
for him, his presidency was to end with one. Having nearly blown up the planet, a
Yeah.
few changes were made. First, the superpowers agreed to a limited test ban treaty. Secondly, the Soviets ousted Khrushchev and replaced him with Leonid Brezhnev, who was a kisser. He liked to kiss.
Well,
Both
great.
sides were deeply concerned at the prospect
Well,
of nuclear
great.
war, but still, the arms race raged on throughout the 60s and 70s. U.S. intelligence worked out that the Soviets' nuclear arsenal was not as powerful as they previously thought, but in fact, it was America that held the advantage. ABMs and MIRVs were developed, and the doctrine of MAD. If both sides knew they would be completely
Mutual assured
destroyed by a
destruction.
nuclear war, neither would risk starting one. But
Yeah.
even without war, the world was already feeling the effects of nuclear weapons. In 1966, above the pleasant town of Palomares in Spain,
Palomares.
a U.S. bomber collided with a tanker mid-air, and 4 hydrogen bombs fell and landed near the town below. It hasn't exploded, so I'm sure everything's fine. Whoa, boy. Hey, I wouldn't eat that if I were you. Okay. What are you gonna do today? Go for a swim?
Don't.
Yeah, I wouldn't. Are you breathing right now?
I never even... This should be big news. I've never even heard of this.
Yeah, I wouldn't. It took the Americans 2.5 months to find one of the bombs, which had gone missing in the ocean. This was the 14th time America had lost a nuclear bomb since 1950. Nobody knows how many bombs the Soviet Union lost.
Oh boy.
So sleep well tonight.
Oh boy.
Kennedys-
Imagine being on like a ship, just like flying, not flying, sorry. Just cruising somewhere and then suddenly in the middle of the ocean, and you're like, what? It just explodes, just... There's also obviously just these nuclear weapons and, the uranium-based weapons as well as the hydrogen weapons. Obviously, we have plenty of missiles and plenty of landmines that are missing as well from World War II. When I was in Munich, I think about 4 years ago, there was like a section on 5 years. It might have been older than that. It might have been like 7 years ago or something. But like there was a section of town like cut off, because they were trying to not defuse. They were actually trying to like set off a landmine from World War II. I remember that being a big thing. So there's plenty of things like that happening.
Assassination.
Never leave your house.
Lyndon B. Johnson took over, and he inherited a developing crisis in the East, Vietnam. Back in the 50s, the Vietnamese had kicked their French colonizers out once and for all, and the country was divided into two. In the north, a communist regime, and in the south, an anti-communist regime.
Always
Both
these
were
communists,
led by
eh?
very sweet liberal men, but don't let that deceive
Men,
you. They were both
and
ruthless dictators, and both dreamed of reuniting Vietnam under their own regime. So the north established the National Liberation Front, also known as the Viet Cong, to carry out a campaign of guerrilla warfare in the south with Soviet support. The U.S. sent advisors to help train the South Vietnamese to deal with the threat, but President Diem's brutal policies pushed more and more South Vietnamese to support the Viet Cong. And over the next decade, the situation escalated to a breaking point. America feared the domino effect. That is, if South Vietnam fell to communism, would Cambodia be next? Then Laos?
and
Thailand?
then-
Burma? India?
Yeah.
LBJ had to make a choice between losing South Vietnam or sending in the troops. And so in they went. From 1965, America found itself in a war unlike anything it had ever fought before. Let's play Spot the Viet Cong Soldier. Did you see him? Of course not. That's because
Hide and
millions of young
seek.
American men were drafted and sent to fight a ruthless enemy who used the thick jungle as its shield.
Yeah.
It was nearly impossible to tell where the
That
enemy
is-
was.
That is one hell of a way to fight, though. Like use the terrain. You know, this is war, but like when you watch movies and fighting movies and whatever, it's always like use your terrain, use the terrain to your advantage. Perfect description.
Or worse, who it was. And as a result, the civilian population got caught up in the brutal crossfire. The city of Saigon found itself under regular attack, and America launched a bombing campaign in the north during Operation Rolling Thunder. The Viet Cong used the Ho Chi Minh Trail running through Laos and Cambodia to supply the campaign. It was a long and brutal war, and I could never do it justice in this video. But
Ooh.
in terms of the Cold War,
Oh, I'm
Vietnam
looking
was
forward to that.
probably the biggest of many, many global
Yeah.
conflicts that signaled a turning point. Under the threat of nuclear war, the two superpowers began working to make their relationship more constructive, and as a result,
Instead of going, well, that's obviously. But where's that sword from? That could just be a random sound. But obviously, like instead of those two countries launching war, it's more so funding other countries, helping other countries overthrow their communist slash democratic leadership, which is a very interesting way to do it. Like, oh, we're not gonna fight ourselves. We're gonna pull the strings and everything else.
their ideological
Proxies.
battle shifted away from the potential of direct conflict and more towards attempting to influence smaller proxy
Let's see what I
wars
just
around the
said.
world. In the Middle East, the Soviet Union provided aid against Israel during the Six-Day War, and then again when the US backed Israel during the Yom Kippur War.
Aye.
In Africa, the Angolan Civil War saw US-supported South Africans fighting Soviet-supported Cubans. In the conflict between Somalia and Ethiopia, the superpowers interestingly
It's
switched
just
sides as
crazy.
regimes changed, and the US continued fighting the spread of communism in its own backyard, funding the famous Contra groups to fight the socialist junta in Nicaragua. These proxy wars were fierce enough to
Never
win,
heard of that.
but superpower intervention amplified the destruction
that.
and created alarming levels of human suffering
How
throughout the
many?
third world. And in Vietnam, that human suffering was all being broadcast back home via good old television. Going into the late 60s,
Yay.
America was a changing nation. This became this.
Hippie!
This became this. And this
Hippie!
became this. The
Yay.
new slogan that was taking root. Make
love, not war.
The majority of Americans did not approve of Johnson's handling of the Vietnam War. And in 1968, a silent majority elected law and order candidate Richard Nixon.
Well
As
then,
the Vietnam
Mr.
War
Nixon.
appeared to be increasingly unwinnable, and public opinion turning increasingly sour, Nixon made the decision to begin bringing the troops home and ended U.S. involvement in Vietnam by 1973.
Aye.
2 years later, the South fell. The Cold War was now taking its toll on both superpowers. In Russia, a huge percentage of the budget was still going to the military. People were still hungry, and they just didn't have access to the same lifestyle and goods as the West. And what did they have to show?
Hey!
They weren't even winning the space race anymore. Both sides needed to reduce spending in order to rescue their economies, and so both welcomed with open arms an easing of hostility.
Look at
what was
that.
known as Détente. To improve relations, Nixon became the first U.S. president to visit Moscow in 1972, and Brezhnev returned the gesture a year later. A number of treaties were signed.
Look
including
at
the
that.
1972 SALT agreement that limited nuclear weapons. Relations with
Look at that. It always comes down to money. It always comes down to money. Like straight up, it always comes down to money. Money, money, money. That's what it comes down to at all
China
times.
were even improving via ping-pong diplomacy when the U.S. table tennis team went on a tour of the People's Republic. However, internally, China was still pushing anti-capitalist propaganda,
course.
which led to some mixed messages. Nixon
American
even
pigs.
visited China in 1972, and it was a barrel of laughs.
Today, the president walks among priceless treasures from China's golden age. Among them, a pair of ear stoppers used by the emperor to keep from hearing criticism.
You put the stopper into his ears so that he couldn't hear the criticism.
Give me a pair.
Like schoolgirls eating cake. That.
Everything was going great for Nixon until it was uncovered that back home he was being a very naughty boy and violating constitutional protocol. I'm announcing today my resignation as president, and I'm passing the office to my vice president, Gerald Ford. Wow, you mean in America the people can actually remove their leader when he breaks the law? Why not just rule by force? Where's the corruption? And my first act as president is to pardon Nixon. Ah, there it is. After the whole fiasco, Americans decided what they really wanted was just a nice, safe guy who wouldn't cheat on them. So they elected Jimmy Carter, and the two sides met.
Don't you just love American politics as a non-American? They're just like looking in from the outside. I'm like, just like,
Vienna, where they signed yet another strategic arms limitation treaty. It's an honor,
Salt
Premier
too.
Brezhnev. Likewise, President Carter. Please don't do that. But that's not to say there was no longer any tension between the two sides, because there was. Heaps of it. Once again, the Soviet Union put down further attempts at reform and rebellion in the Eastern Bloc. The Euro missile crisis saw new and improved classes of intermediate range.
Okay, now that we have this laid out the way it is, France, right here. Did I confuse France with Germany? I probably did. France right here, Italy right here. Which one is Belgium? Which one out of those two is Belgium? I think that's Belgium right here. And then what would that be? Switzerland? Could be. This right here is obviously Germany, but this part right here will be added, or at least partially, you know, because, well, you know, this whole part here will be added because once the influence, the Russian influence disappears, this whole part, you know, East Germany will be added to what they called West Germany, and then Greenland, I'm assuming. They mentioned Turkey earlier, so I'm assuming that's Turkey right here. That's massive, actually. Austria, I believe. And then you kind of lost me. I think this split. This has to split up because I don't think Poland is that big. And then you obviously have the likes. Oh yeah, that definitely splits up because if that's all of Russia, that definitely splits up in the manner of like Poland, Ukraine, Slovakia. That's you go from like you start from like here all the way down until like here, like this portion right here gets split up into many well, the red obviously symbolizes the influence from Russia. That's really what it's all about, you know, the influence from Russia. But that all loses more influence over the next couple of years.
Missiles being
My
deployed
history
in
of Europe,
In
basically.
1979,
My
the Soviets
limited.
thought it would be a good idea if they had their own Vietnam and invaded Afghanistan to prevent a U.S.-sponsored Islamic insurgency.
Joy.
And in response to these various crises, Olympic Games were boycotted. Conservatives were concerned that U.S. policy had become too soft, and in 1980, they
They
decided
wanted
they
someone
wanted
stronger.
a president who would be tough on
Of
communism.
course.
So they elected Ronald Reagan, and Reagan came in guns blazing.
Oh, yeah.
Concerned at the Soviet Union's human rights violations, he made a speech calling them an evil empire, and he also wanted to renew the arms race using
That goes down
technological
well.
advances in computing and lasers. He came up with the Space Defense Initiative, also known as Star Wars, which was basically a big defensive anti-nuke shield around the country, but a lot of people thought it was a pretty dumb idea. The Soviet Union perceived this shift in rhetoric as the USA getting ready for war, and they were feeling especially threatened as their relationship with their communist ally China had broken down. Relations took a big hit in 1983 when the Soviets shot down a Korean airliner that had strayed into their airspace, and it looked like the world was going right back to mid-20th century Cold War tensions.
Just Just
then
like
Brezhnev
that.
got really old and died, and was replaced by this guy who was really old and died, and was replaced by this guy who was really old and died, and he was replaced by Mikhail
That
Gorbachev.
up here. I
In the
thought it
end
was
of
down
August
here.
of 1985, he
Gorbachev.
was the real game changer. His
Yeah,
philosophy.
I thought it was down here. I thought it was like, that's why I was like doing that. I thought it was like his birthmark was down here, but no, it's up here. I have not so much a birthmark. I've got a scar right here. You guys can't really see it that much, but when I was a kid, the door. I was in a hospital, apparently close to dying. I don't remember it, right? Like, I just remember door handle. Well, I don't remember that. I was told door handle. Where am I? So since then, nah. But yeah.
He differed a lot from previous Soviet leaders. He felt that the reason the Soviet system and economy was struggling was that it didn't allow the Soviet people to find satisfaction in their work, because they weren't allowed to speak freely and lived in fear. Gorbachev wanted the Soviet
Get rid of
people
that.
to be happy, but unlike previous Soviet leaders, he actually made the change happen.
Yeah.
In the first couple of years, he began the political movement for more openness and transparency, and the restructuring of the Soviet political and economic systems. And change very quickly took effect. People could criticize the government, they could enjoy Western pop culture, the media interviewed Margaret Thatcher, but most importantly,
girl.
the Soviet people could now enjoy Pizza Hut. All hail to Gorbachev. He also knew that the arms race needed to end in order to rescue the Soviet economy, and a positive relationship with the West must be established. Constructive dialogue reopened and resulted in the INF Treaty, which saw all intermediate-range missiles eliminated, which was huge. Reagan's tone towards the Soviet Union began to soften, and things were looking up. But what would these reforms mean for the Eastern Bloc? For decades, the Soviets had been brutally suppressing any attempt at change. Now, would they be allowed? And that was the exact question on Hungary's lips when the Prime Minister visited Moscow. Gorbachev's response, he didn't necessarily agree with the reforms, but he wouldn't stop them either. He was prepared to let the Eastern Bloc choose its own future. This was massive.
Too
And
nice of a
Hungarian
person,
leaders
some
began
might
planning
say.
free, multi-party elections. Poland followed suit and also held elections in June. The anti-Soviet party, Solidarity, won 99 out of 100 seats in the Senate. But not just that. In Hungary, the barbed wire border between East and West was removed.
Yeah.
The Iron Curtain was unraveling. But not all Eastern Bloc leaders were happy. Notably, East Germany was still ruled by a hardline Stalinist, Erich Honecker, and many East Germans were still eager to get out. They had been trapped by the Berlin Wall, but now they were doing the math. If they could travel to Hungary, and Hungary's border with the West was loosening, could they now make it to the West? That summer, East Germans decided Hungary was the latest top holiday destination. They traveled there in droves, and using various methods, tens of thousands crossed the border into Austria.
I mean, if that's already...
Honecker was furious and blocked travel to Hungary, but that civil liberties train had started rolling, and it wasn't stopping. Thousands more flocked to the West German embassy in Prague, where they stormed the fence around the embassy gardens, and a temporary refugee camp was set up. In September, deals were struck to allow the refugees to travel west via train.
People
Back
will
in
not
East Germany,
be
the people
stopped.
were running on a civil liberties high, and they wanted their next hit. Dissent was growing. Over time, demonstrations turned to mass protest, with plainclothes secret police officers doing their best to put down the dissent, but it had grown well out of their control. And worse, the biggest demonstration was yet to come. We're gonna put all of this down by force, right guys?
Yeah.
Guys?
That's gonna go
Unfortunately,
down well.
Everyone had realized what he had not. This was bigger than them, and the entire East German Politburo voted him out of power. On November 4th, over 500,000 East Germans took to the streets of East Berlin. For many, there was still one big target left in their sights. That damn wall. The pressure on the East German government was too great, and on November 9th, they made a bit of a chaotic announcement that the travel ban between East and West was being lifted. The change wasn't meant to take effect until the next day, and crossing guards still had orders to shoot on sight any who tried to cross. But that night, huge crowds gathered at the crossing points, and the guards were overwhelmed. In an astronomically
Did they
historic
shoot?
moment, after decades of family separation and travel restriction,
Nope.
people were allowed to pass
Nope.
through.
They did
East
not.
And West Berliners couldn't believe it and celebrated together throughout the night. Some even climbed the wall and began to topple it. The Iron Curtain had fallen, and a year
That's
later,
that's
Germany
one of the few
would be
things that I do
reunited.
know.
Elections in Bulgaria, a peaceful revolution in Czechoslovakia, and a violent one in Romania brought to an end communist authority in the Eastern Bloc. America decided it would be best if it just stayed away and let the change happen, as the anti-communist movement continued all the way back
Shock,
to Moscow.
right?
Gorbachev had given the people the freedom to demonstrate. Now, they demonstrated for an end to the communist single-party rule, and Gorbachev had to give in. For the first time in history, elections were held in which candidates not officially endorsed by the party.
You know how good that is? I need to take my headphones off for that. Do you know how good my earphones? Do you know how good that is? It's easy to say something like, "Oh, I want to give y'all freedom, the freedom of choice to decide yourself." It's easy to say that, But when you're in charge to actually do that for the place you're in charge of, that's crazy. Straight up, that's crazy. You're essentially, you're not giving up power necessarily, all right? But you're essentially changing not just other countries, but your own, because of goodwill. Now, I'm not too familiar with Gorbachev myself. I knew the Mark. I knew a little bit about him. I did a little bit of research on him a long time ago, but I'm not like super familiar. So I don't actually know whether he's committed any atrocities. I don't want to like paint him as a hero. I'm just saying that this specific act is very heroic. He's not a hero. Maybe he is, maybe he's not. But he's not a hero. But those are very heroic acts.
Were allowed to run. Ambitious rival of Gorbachev, Boris Yeltsin led a growing democratic movement. Now things here get
And then you switch over to how Russia is today with an oligarchy.
quite complicated, and the dissolution of the Soviet Union is a complicated topic. So believe me, this is oversimplified. But it went a little bit like this. The Soviet Union was made up of a number of smaller Soviet republics, the largest of which was Russia. Yeltsin got himself elected the president of Russia and began a struggle for sovereignty against Gorbachev and the greater Soviet Union. Communist hardliners were horrified at what Gorbachev was allowing, so they briefly kidnapped him and tried to set up their own emergency government. But Yeltsin and his supporters all gathered around the White House in Moscow and were like, no, we have a time. So the hardliners had to concede and released Gorbachev. Wow, thanks Boris. That was a close one. No problem. And thanks to you for all the great freedom you've given us.
Yeah.
Anytime, pal. And just to inform you, I've used that freedom you've given us to go behind your back and make a deal with Ukraine and Belarus to dissolve the Soviet Union and set up the Russian Federation. In other words, you're no longer in charge. I am.
Great. Perfect.
So uncool. So decades
Perfect.
of tension and the everlasting threat of nuclear war finally came to an end as democratic governments were established in many of the old Soviet republics, and the world got along together forever after. Right, guys? Hey, this modern art thing is
Well, we're free.
Where can I learn to do that? Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community with classes in design, technology, business, and more. Learn how to code your own games and apps. Learn a musical instrument. Learn how to animate videos like mine. Learn Japanese. Premium membership gives you unlimited access to all of these classes and more. And better yet, everything is taught by genuine experts working in their field. Skillshare is also more affordable than other learning platforms, with an annual subscription being less than $10 a month. What's that? You wish you had an exclusive deal just for Oversimplified viewers? Well, wish no more, my friend. The first 500 people to use this link, which can be found in the description below, will get their first 2 months for absolutely free. Plus, you'll be supporting my channel and keeping these videos coming. So be sure to use the link in the description box below. And
As you all know,
today.
I want them to chase that money. I want them to let their sponsors be known, because quite frankly, I'm the one that's reacting to that video. So I will let them advertise their sponsors on my video too. But yeah, that was very informative. I kind of want to learn more about Gorbachev now, honestly, because we know how it all started with obviously the failings of World War II, but seeing how it kind of all stopped, I wasn't familiar with. Like, I always thought the Berlin Wall that started, and then after that, you know, peace and happiness. But obviously that's not how politics works. I didn't know that, you know, for example, that they were told that you could actually travel. I thought they just smashed it in, and then they just said, yeah, no more to this divide. But no, you know, I wasn't familiar. I straight up, the first time I actually heard of the Berlin Wall was back in secondary school. It was a fun thing. We had like a class, we had like a school assembly, which we always had, like, I think at the beginning of the week, just so like the whole school would know, like if it's a special week or something. And I remember, like, at the beginning, the teacher, yeah, our whole year was there. So it was always a whole year. So it was like, imagine like 500, 600, 700 people in, you know, in an assembly at the beginning of a week. And I remember the teacher asking, like the person at the front, the teacher at the front, it was like the head of our year, basically. He was standing at the front and saying, like, does anyone know what this week is? And we had some people that were like, you know, I think I raised my hand and I was like, Simpsons anniversary? Like, no. No. The anniversary of Simpsons? No. I think the question that he actually asked was, does anyone know what anniversary it is today? I thought we just had a bunch of people just asking what it was, and I think he said it was the 20th anniversary of the Berlin Wall being taken down. It could have been the 25th, it could have been the 30th. I'm not 100% sure. I just remember that was the first time I heard of like the Berlin Wall. And he mentioned that basically, and it's like, so. Then like once I was told, I was like, okay, let me do some research on that once I get home, because I have no idea what he's talking about. He was saying that, and he was like, obviously, with some humor towards Germany, as you would expect from a Brit. He was basically just like saying that, this and that happened, this and that happened. Okay, now you all know Coolio. And I was like, okay, I need to find out more. I need to find out more. I don't know enough, and I don't like not knowing enough. So I went home, researched a tiny little bit, not too much. I was like, a wall? Yeah, that's not too much. So I saw that it was taken down. Okay, cool. Now I know about that part. But I didn't know how the actual Cold War ended, so to say. I mean, it was a Cold War. It wasn't an active one, but it was a cold one. There was never an official declaration of war. But just knowing more right now is amazing. Gorbachev, I think the first time I heard of him, honestly, was the epic rap battle of history. What is it? Stalin versus Rasputin, and then Gorbachev comes in and is like, if your name ends with in, it's time to get out. And I just remember that. I was like, okay, I need to look up, research, aka Wikipedia, who Gorbachev was, who knew Rasputin and Stalin. Putin, I knew as well, honestly. But like, the only one I really didn't know was I knew who. Actually, I knew who all of them were besides Gorbachev. So that's when I researched who Gorbachev was by going on Wikipedia. That's basically my history. If I see an epic rap battle of history back then, not so much nowadays, but back then when I saw an epic rap battle of history, I would like research the people before watching the epic rap battle of history. That's, for example, how I researched Thomas Edison, found out everything about him, as well as Nikola Tesla. And I was like, wow, Nikola Tesla was amazing. And then a few years later, Tesla became, the company Tesla became such a huge thing. I was like, wow, what a coincidence. But yeah, great video by Oversimplified. As I always say, I have the link for their video in the description down below, so you guys can check out the original one. Let me know what you want me to react to next. I will see you all in the next one, everyone. Until then, have a nice day. Peace out, and as always,